Most people who've made their own comic or manga want to have it adapted into an anime. I know I do, but not everyone has access to a studio full of talented staff and a high budget to get things done, which I do not. I'm on a journey to create an anime all by myself. Whether it's a feature film or a full series, I'm planning to do it. I'm going to bring you guys along with me on that journey and show you step by step how I'm going about it, so hopefully you can do it for yourselves. Now, this mini comic I made is basically just a fight scene, and it's 52 to 56 panels, but today we're going to start with just 2 and turn those 2 rough thumbnail panels into 22 frames of animation. And by the time this video is done, you should have a better idea of where to start adapting your own comics and series into anime for yourself. So, let's get right to it. So in this medieval madness, Fox vs. Panda animation, the first scene I'll be adapting is Dennis's opening fall and landing scene. It's a classic superhero 3-point landing type scene, and I want to make it as dynamic as possible.
So you're gonna do a superhero landing. Wait for it!
So you open your animation program of choice. I'm using Ibis Paint X, and I highly recommend it, but these principles will work no matter what program you are using. So first things first is we have to create the motion, which means we have to figure out exactly how we want our character to move and plan it out before doing full animation and sketches, because we don't want to waste our own time. Our time is valuable. So I'm using this rough circle to kind of plan out how I want the fall to go. I want to use dynamic camera angles and quick movement, bringing Dennis close to the camera as possible, getting a close-up on his face, and then the camera is actually going to be a little bit too slow to keep up with him, panning down as he lands with authority. So as rough as that is, now the movement is created and we have an idea of what we'll be doing. This is how I saw it in my mind when I was thumbnailing the comic initially, so I'm pretty happy with this so far. Adapting a scene like this is very straightforward. The first and second panel are almost an animation in themselves. You're just missing the connecting frames in the middle. Not every scene is this easy to adapt. Some scenes will change greatly from the medium of a comic to animation, as the storytelling is different between each medium. Similar, but sometimes you might want to take advantage of the fact that this is a moving picture rather than a still picture and change certain things up. But for this specific tutorial, we're keeping it simple, which is why I chose this animation to start with. Since I want almost a 1-to-1 copy of these 2 panels, except animated, I will actually import the thumbnail into my drawing space, my drawing window. Now, if this was a finished comic as opposed to rough thumbnails, it would be a completed image. I would just trace over it, bringing it into the animation. But we're doing rough animation right now, and this is a rough image, so I'll just kind of trace over that, clean up the anatomy a little bit, and then we'll move on. Using the first image I put down as a guide and the circle I drew for movement, I will continue to fill in the poses. So since he's falling, I want him to come at the camera, so I'll use pushed perspective or foreshortening, making his feet bigger, his torso smaller, because if you were looking at someone from this angle, it would look like that. That's how perspective works. To get better at perspective, animating actually helped me get better at perspective, but also look at a 3D model and zoom out from it. Look at it from top to bottom. Take pictures of yourself at strange angles and just study as much crazy perspective as you can in art and in real life as well. The thing to remember is that if you can draw, you can animate. The drawing skills are always going to help your animation. Knowing how movement works, how to make movement look pleasing to the eye, can be learned through studying and practice, but if you can't draw your character or the object you're animating well enough, having good mastery of movement won't help you in adapting your comic. But if you drew your comic, it should be fairly easy to draw and animate it yourself. I'm using the principles of dynamic animation, which is camera movement and character movement. I'm bringing my character as close to the camera as possible. And when I say camera, it's basically a camera in my mind. Pushing the perspective, and then also moving the camera in my mind as well, as opposed to just moving the character. Now, I made a video on how to make dynamic animation. I recommend you guys check that out if you want a more in-depth tutorial on how to do dynamic animation specifically. But you're basically going to just keep going, filling in those frames until you're satisfied with the movement, getting the idea in your head on the canvas. When you're adapting a scene like this, you're basically just filling in the blanks. You can do it as simply or as complexly as you want. You can add more frames or less frames, or you could honestly just animate Dennis falling just straight down and landing like this. But when you add dynamic movement to that, you can make it look like this. This is the finished rough animation, and I used those two panels as guides to make the most important poses, the start pose and the end pose, and then I just filled in the blanks. I keep saying filling in the blanks. I feel like I should go into that a little bit. When you're making your comic, there's a lot of actions and subtle things that you're not able to show because of the medium. You draw the images necessary to guide the reader's mind through the story, and the gutter space or the blank area or the missing actions are filled in by the reader's imagination. But when you're doing animation, you don't have to leave anything to the imagination. You fill in everything, and the audience, as opposed to the reader, is able to just follow along with it and feel the movement or the scene through your animation. So how well you convey your movements, your character acting, and the way you construct your scenes is still going to be guiding your audience, but just in a different way. So what you need to do after this is check through the rough animation, watch it a few times, make sure you feel good about it, make sure you like how it looks, make any changes if necessary, and then we move on to tying down the character's look. As great as animation is, we need to know who it is you're animating. This could be anyone right now, so now it's my job to turn this character that I've animated into Dennis. I'll say again, if this was a completed comic, this would be way easier, as I would just trace the finished image in the style that I've chosen for the animation, because usually you're going to want to simplify your comic style a little bit. Being the artist, you could actually just draw each frame as if it was a panel from your comic, but to do that would make the animation process take way longer, and it's not really necessary. The movement and the quality of it can make up for the drawings, and good drawings can make up for bad movement, but I feel like it's important to find a good balance. So even though as I go and I make Dennis look like himself and I add all the details, I feel like I'm putting a little bit too much, but it's not insane. It's not going to be anything too difficult, because remember, you have to animate this consistently. Doing a lot of complex line work and shading and details is great for keyframes, key poses, and things that will be focused on a little bit longer, but when you play an animation back, no matter how it looks when you're just flipping through it, everything is moving way faster. These frames or drawings are only on screen for a fraction of a second. This animation is at 12 FPS or frames per second. You could do 24, you could do 16. The frame rate doesn't matter as much, in my opinion. I just choose whatever frame rate I think will make the movement look better. 12 was good for this because I didn't want to do too much in between frames, which is just adding more drawings in between key poses to make the movement smoother. I wanted this to be snappy and quick, so I opted for less frames with the actions spaced farther apart, as opposed to more in-betweens, which I felt was the right decision for this scene. Now, remember, that's not to say you can just scribble through your drawings. You do want to make them good, but you just don't need to add as much detail as you would in your comic. unless, you want to. It's your animation. You can do what you want. But honestly, it's not necessary to achieve a great result. If you look at some of your favorite anime, go through it frame by frame, which I highly recommend if you want to get better at animation in general. You'll see that in action-heavy scenes with a lot of fast movement, the character changes a lot. If you look at a frame and then you look at a frame a few minutes later, the character could look slightly different. Certain details could be very minimized or left out. And then, if you look at a more still frame, a close-up shot, or something like that, even in that action scene, it'll be way more detailed. So, the point is, pick and choose where to add your detail and where to tone it down. It'll save you time, and the result will be better, if not the same. The most important moments here in this animation were Dennis's landing and the few frames where his face is close to the camera. I wanted to make those look as good as possible so that even though it went by fast, you can clearly identify that it's him. A bad drawing is a bad drawing. Even if it goes by insanely fast, your brain's going to pick up on that. So I made sure to put my time heavily into those 2 frames, redoing them, erasing, and making sure that they looked as close to Dennis as possible. What helped with this was the character design sheet I made for the comic, and the many, many concept drawings and different illustrations I've made of Dennis over time. This helped me make sure he looked consistent in every frame, even the ones where I minimized the detail. Also, I want to touch on real quick, frames like this one at the beginning that are from really far away. The camera is really far away from your character, and they're really small. You can really tone down the details extra heavy on this, because as small as it looks to you, it's going to look even smaller when you're viewing it as it's playing in real time. So you can really simplify the character in this moment. As you can see, Dennis is very much simplified as compared to the same frame which I copied that is farther down, where you can see him closer up. It's more detailed. So the farther away the character is, the less detail you have to put. And there's evidence of this in amazing anime as well, as I'll show on the screen. Now that is honestly the most important part. From here you just add line work, color, and shading to your animation, which is pretty straightforward. Depending on your program, you just do how you would normally do in your illustration, because animations is really just drawings put together. And I find when I think about it like that, it's way less intimidating than thinking of it as movement necessarily. It's the illusion of movement made by drawings, which I really love. And that is basically the down and dirty of how you would animate and adapt a comic panel to animation. I took these 2 thumbnails I made and turned them into 22 total frames of animation. And when I play it through, it is 2 seconds long, which I'm pretty satisfied with. Subscribe, so you can see more of these. And I will be making more and more videos on adapting my comics into anime by myself. If you think that's cool, if you want to learn how, because I will make a video on every single part of my process and be as clear and concise as I can, answer as many questions as I can. Subscribe. You should subscribe, honestly. Now, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you, and watch the video being recommended to you right now, because that would be awesome. I spent a lot of time on all of these. Okay, bye.